So today we're going to look at the Ethernet shield on the Arduino, and we'll go through an example, an Ethernet web server example. And so first we'll just look through the code, see what the code's going to do, and then we'll actually try it out and see how it works. So let's first look at the code. We're going to look at a sketch on one of the example sketches. So go to File, Examples, Ethernet 2, because my shield is an Ethernet 2 shield, Ethernet 2, and web server. So that's the example we'll look at. Let's look at that. Now I've already gotten that open, so let me just pull it up. Yeah, here we go. Alright, so let me close that other one. Here we are. So this is the web server. This is the beginning of it. I have a nice big bold font. So this web server, what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to have the Ethernet shield and the Arduino act like a web server. So I should be able to take a web client, basically a web browser, and point it to the IP address on my shield. And with that, I should see a web page. And in this case, the web page will contain six numbers that are the readings, the analog readings on the analog inputs, A0 through A5. That's not particularly of interest to us, but that's what you will see on the web on the website when you go to it. So our Arduino should act like a web server. So let's go through the code, see how that's coded. Skip the comments. Okay, so we start with our includes right here, SPI.h and Ethernet2.h. Then go down. Now, note that we have a MAC address and an IP address. So here's the MAC address. Now, where I got that MAC address from? Actually, I got that MAC address from a sticker on the back of the Ethernet shield. So if I just copied that. Now then the IP address that I used, I decided to use, I used a local address. So if you look at this address, 128.195.54.255, the first three numbers, those are the three numbers of my local network. And then the last number there, I just made up. I chose one that I was pretty sure wasn't being used by anything on my local network. So then I got my IP address. Now let's go down to the code. Ethernet server, I create a server. And it's reading on port 80 because that's where web traffic goes, where HTTP traffic goes. So I create the server. Then in the setup, I start serial.begin. The reason why I do that is because that's just for information's sake. That doesn't control, that's just showing how the server is operating. So the server is going to periodically print stuff to the serial monitor just so I can see its progress. But even without the serial, it would work. It's just if I want to see the progress, I can see some intermediate, some debugging data, essentially. So I set up the serial connection. Then we say Ethernet.begin, starting the Ethernet adapter. Give it the MAC address and the IP address that I set. Then you start the server with the server.begin. Then to the serial monitor, it's going to print the server and its address. So server is at, and it'll give the IP address. Whoops. And that IP address, I'm sorry about that. The IP address that it prints should basically match the IP address that I chose up there. So that's just for diagnostics. So that's the setup. It starts the server with that server.begin, and that's the setup. Now at that point, what the Arduino does, it enters a loop. So first thing it does is it calls server.available. So server.available right here returns false if there's no client trying to talk to the server. And by client, I mean essentially a web browser or something like that. So a web browser, there's no web browser trying to talk to the server. Server.available returns nothing, returns false. But if there is a client trying to talk to the server, then it returns the client. So the next line says if client. So if there is a client listening, then it prints new client to the serial monitor, and it tries to connect to the client. That's right here. Sorry, I'm selecting things incorrectly. Yeah. So it tries to connect to the client with this while.connected. So if it connects to the client, then it calls if client available, right? So if client.available is true, that means that there is actually data waiting from the client because it's waiting for the client to actually send it a message. So if there is data waiting from a client, then it reads that. It calls client.read and reads that data, whatever the character is, and this is reading just a single character at this point. And then it calls serial.write to write that to the screen, to the serial monitor. So it prints that to the serial monitor. Now, in addition to that, what it does is, so it expects that this, whatever is coming from the client has got to be an HTTP request, right? Because it's expecting that this is a web client and it would be making a request typically for a web page, for the data inside a web page. So it waits until it sees a blank line. So it says if the character is equal to /n, meaning a character, and the current line is blank. If that's the case, then it says, okay, that means that the request is done, right? It has finished, this client has finished sending its request for a web page. So now it's the job of the server to send a response. Now this response is going to be an HTTP 200 OK response. And so that's what the first line is. It starts sending that information. Client.println, this is a standard 200 OK response, and it sends some header lines. Now after it sends the header lines, it actually has to it starts sending some HTML. HTML is how a web page is described. So it has to send the web page information so that the client can render it, can draw that on the screen. So you can see here, you can see client.println HTML. So that's the beginning of the HTML. And then it starts sending, it gets into a for loop right here. Right here, starts a for loop, where it starts sending the data about each analog channel. So notice that it's calling analog read for each channel. It's iterating through channels 0 through 5, and for each channel it does an analog read. And then it prints out, or rather sends to the client, analog input for that channel it sends sensor reading, which is what it read, which was whatever the sensor value was. So that sensor value is printed on the screen, and or rather it will be printed on the screen by the client when the client renders it. And at the end of all this, it sends a /HTML to indicate that that's the end of the HTML, end of the web page. So that's the response message. That's the whole response message. Then it's looking for a character turn. But at the end, eventually, it reaches this client stop down here. When the client stops being connected, it sends a client stop message to end the connection, and then prints out client disconnected, and that's it. So what we expect to see when we run this, if this is all working, is we expect to see a web page. We expect to take our client, our web browser, and go to the web page to the IP address that I've chosen. And what we should see is a web page that basically prints out 6 lines, 6 statements, which tell you the analog values. So, and these sensor values, I haven't hooked up anything to these analog inputs. So you'll just get random numbers between 0 and 255. But you know that's what we expect to see, and it should update periodically. Okay, so I have already taken the liberty of uploading this code to my Arduino. So my Arduino, I have the Arduino sitting here connected to my laptop, and on top of that I have stacked the Ethernet shield. Now this Ethernet shield, I have taken an Ethernet cable and connected it from the Ethernet shield to the switch that I have on my desk. So I have a switch, but this could just as well be a router. If you have some router in your house, this could be a router too, but I've connected to a switch. So the Arduino is right now it is running its server because I have it connected I have a wired connection to the switch. All right, so let us start looking at this. Actually, let's upload it again for fun. Let's upload it one more time. It's compiling it and uploading it, and actually we'll start the serial monitor just to see the responses. Compiling sketch. So as soon as it uploads the sketch, we will take a look at the serial monitor to see what it shows. Uploading. Give it just a few seconds. Done uploading. So okay, let's start the serial monitor. Now here's the serial monitor. There it is. Server is at, and it gives me the IP address. So the server is now waiting. That was in the setup. If you remember in the setup code, it was supposed to print that. So it does. So let's close this. So now we see the serial monitor, and the server is up and running. So now we need to get that server to do something. So let's open up a browser. So I will open up my my Mozilla Firefox, but it does not matter which browser you use. And it's at my default page /.org. So now I'm going to go into the address, and I'm going to type in the IP address of my Arduino. So that was 128.195.54.255. And when I do that, hit return. There. Now you can see, let's move this over a little bit. First, if you look in the browser, you can see the numbers I was talking about. Actually, I was wrong about the range. It's from 0 to 1023 because these numbers are all in the range 0 to 1023. And it's just reading off whatever analog voltage it reads off of those analog pins and converting them to a number from 0 to 1023 because that's what analog read does, and it's printing them. And it's updating periodically because this browser is periodically sending new request messages to the server. Now over here, inside the serial monitor, you can see what it's receiving, what the Arduino is receiving from the client, from the browser. And it's updating periodically, but notice it's a get. It's just sending the standard message, standard request message. And as soon as the server receives that, it sends back its response, which is rendered, as you can see over here, in the client, which is the web browser. So that's it.